You think you know your family until they laugh at the one thing you've bled for. I sat in the dim glow of my office, the email glaring back at me from the laptop screen. My name, Dr. Sarah Mitchell, typed in crisp font, but the words below it cut deeper than any scalpel I'd ever held. My brother Ethan's invitation to our parents' 25th wedding anniversary celebration in Portland, Oregon, wasn't a gesture of love. It was a summons, signed with a single cold line, "Don't embarrass us." I stared at it, the hospital's hum fading around me, beeping monitors, the faint sting of antiseptic, the shuffle of nurses' shoes down the hall. 5 years. That's how long it had been since I last saw them. 5 years since Ethan called me a small-town doc with a smirk. Since my mother, Patricia, told me I'd thrown away my future to play hero in a nowhere hospital. I leaned back in my chair, the weight of the email settling like damp fog. Outside, the Oregon night pressed against the window, stars sharp above the dark pines of Bend. I'm a cardiothoracic surgeon, 38 years old, with hands that have cracked open chests to restart hearts. I've held lives in my palms, felt the pulse of survival under my fingers. Yet to my family, I'm the disappointment who chose a rural hospital over a shiny New York practice. The email wasn't just an invite. It was a dare. Show up, Sarah, and prove you're still nothing. I closed the laptop, the click loud in the quiet. My scrubs were still creased from a 14-hour shift, my hair pulled back in a messy bun. I didn't need a mirror to know I looked tired, exhausted, maybe, but weak never. I thought back to the last family gathering, Christmas in Eugene, 5 years ago. The dining room smelled of cedar and roasted turkey, the table gleaming with Patricia's heirloom silver. Ethan, already a hotshot lawyer, leaned across the table, wine glass in hand, and said, "So, Sarah, still patching up farmers in that backwater clinic." The room laughed sharp, like breaking glass. My father, Robert, stayed silent, his eyes on his plate. Patricia adjusted her napkin and said, "You could have been something. Sarah, why choose this, a hospital where I'd saved a teenager's life that morning, where I worked with equipment older than my med school diploma?" I didn't answer then. I just left, the snow crunching under my boots as I walked to my car. No calls followed and no apologies, just silence, thick and heavy, like the charts piling up on my desk. Now, this email. I traced the edge of my stethoscope, looped around my neck like a lifeline. The hospital was quiet tonight, the kind of quiet that feels alive, like it's waiting for something to break. I remembered a patient from last week, a logger named Tom, his heart failing after a mill accident. I'd operated for 7 hours, my hands steady, my mind sharp, until his pulse came back strong. He grabbed my hand after, tears in his eyes, and said, "Doc, you're a damn miracle." My family didn't see that. They saw a daughter who'd failed their script, who'd chosen dirt roads over skyscrapers. I opened the laptop again, hit reply, and typed 3 words, "I'll be there." No warmth, no promises, just truth. I wasn't going to celebrate. I was going to be seen. The invitation sat like a loaded syringe, its words sharp with intent. Portland was 3 hours away, a drive through the Cascades that would give me time to think, to steel myself. I stood, grabbed my coat, and walked out into the hospital corridor. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly, the air cool against my skin. A nurse, Carla, nodded as I passed, her eyes kind but tired. "You okay?" "Dr. Mitchell," she asked. I gave her a small smile. "Just heading to a fight I didn't start." She didn't ask more. She didn't need to. I stepped into the parking lot, the gravel crunching under my sneakers. the night air sharp with pine and promise. I wasn't driving to Portland to beg for their approval. I was going to remind them who I'd become without it. The road to Portland stretched ahead, a ribbon of asphalt curling through the Cascades, where pines stood like silent sentinels under a sky bruised with dusk. My hands gripped the wheel of my old Subaru, the engine's hum a steady counterpoint to the storm in my chest. I'd left Bend at dawn, the hospital still waking behind me, its lights flickering like a heartbeat. 3 hours to go. 3 hours to replay the email from Ethan. Its words etched in my mind, "Don't embarrass us." It wasn't just a warning. It was a blade, sharpened by years of their dismissal. I was Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the surgeon who'd pulled lives back from the edge. But to them, I was still the sister who'd chosen wrong, the daughter who'd traded prestige for purpose. The mountains loomed, their peaks jagged against the fading light. I passed a sign for sisters, the town's name a cruel irony. Ethan's face flashed in my mind, his smirk at that Christmas dinner 5 years ago, his voice dripping with condescension, still patching up farmers. "Sarah," he'd said, as if my work at Deschutes Memorial was a hobby, not a calling. I'd saved a man's life that day, a father of 3 with a torn aorta, my hands buried in his chest while the OR team held their breath. No one at that dinner asked about it. Not Ethan, not my father, Robert, who'd once dreamed I'd be chief of surgery at Mount Sinai. Not my mother, Patricia, whose silence cut deeper than her words. I'd left that night, the snow swallowing my footsteps, vowing never to return. Yet here I was, driving toward them, toward a fight I didn't choose but couldn't avoid. A memory hit, sharp and unbidden. 2 years ago, an anonymous email landed in the state medical board's inbox, accusing me of unprofessional conduct in a high-risk surgery. I'd saved a girl, 16, her heart failing after a car wreck. The surgery was textbook, but the accusation claimed I'd falsified records to cover a mistake. My license hung in the balance for months. My nights spent poring over legal documents, my days haunted by doubt. The board cleared me, but the scar remained a shadow on my record, a whisper in my career. I'd suspected Ethan then, his jealousy always simmering beneath his polished suits. He'd never forgiven me for being Dad's favorite once, for the way Robert used to brag about my med school grades. I had no proof, just a gut feeling. Heavy as lead. The road dipped, and I pulled into a gas station, the neon sign buzzing like a trapped fly. The air smelled of diesel and damp earth. As I filled the tank, a man in a flannel shirt approached, his face weathered, familiar. "Dr. Mitchell," he asked, hesitant. I nodded, bracing for a complaint or a question. Instead, he grinned. "You saved my brother. Tom, last month, heart attack at the mill. He's back home now. Thanks to you?" I blinked, warmth cutting through the chill. "Just doing my job," I said. But he shook his head. "No, Doc, you're a damn hero." I smiled, tight, and climbed back into the car. A hero to strangers, a failure to my own blood. The contrast burned. I turned on the radio, then switched it off. A podcast about forgiveness had played earlier, its host droning about letting go. I'd snorted and hit stop. Forgiveness didn't mean erasing the past. It didn't mean pretending Ethan's words hadn't stung, or that Patricia's silence hadn't carved out pieces of me. I glanced at the passenger seat, where the invitation sat, folded in my bag. Its weight was more than paper. It was years of being unseen, of being measured against a life I didn't want. Portland's skyline appeared, all glass and steel, a world away from Ben's quiet streets. I wasn't here to fit into their story. I was here to rewrite my own. The city lights blinked, like eyes waiting to judge. I pressed the gas, my heart steady, my hands ready for whatever came next. The Portland skyline glittered through the restaurant's floor-to-ceiling windows, all sharp angles and cold light, like a city trying too hard to impress. I stepped into the banquet hall, the air thick with the scent of rosemary and expensive wine. The anniversary party for my parents, Patricia and Robert, was in full swing, crystal chandeliers casting soft glows. Waiters weaving through tables with practiced grace, laughter rising like bubbles in champagne. I'd chosen a navy dress, simple but sharp, the kind that said I belonged without begging for attention. No scrubs, no stethoscope, just me, Dr. Sarah Mitchell, walking into a room that felt like a courtroom. Patricia spotted me first. Her smile was tight, polished, the kind she wore for church fundraisers. "Sarah," she said, her voice a mix of surprise and warning. "You made it." Her eyes flicked over my dress, searching for flaws, finding none. Robert stood beside her, his tie perfectly knotted, his face unreadable. "Good to see you," he mumbled, but his gaze drifted to the crowd, already dismissing me. Then came Ethan, my brother, striding over with a glass of bourbon in hand, his lawyer's smirk as sharp as ever. "Well, look who's here," he said, loud enough for nearby guests to turn. The small-town doc graces us with her presence, still saving cows in Bend. Sarah. The table beside us chuckled, their laughter a blade slicing through the air. I didn't flinch. I'd heard worse from him. They led me to my seat, tucked in a corner near the fire exit, the table half hidden by a potted fern. My place card read, Sarah M., in small, dismissive font, like an afterthought. I sat, the chair creaking under me, the heat from the kitchen brushing my neck. Across the room, Ethan held court, his voice booming as he told a story about a high-profile case he'd won. Patricia beamed, her hand on Robert's arm, their pride in him a spotlight I'd never felt. I sipped my water, the glass cold against my palm, and watched. I wasn't here to beg for their warmth. I was here to face their chill. A memory clawed its way up 2 years ago. That anonymous email to the medical board. It had accused me of falsifying records, nearly cost me my license. I'd spent sleepless nights wondering who hated me enough to try to ruin me. Now, watching Ethan's smug grin, I knew. His jealousy had always been there, festering since we were kids. When Dad would read my med school acceptance letter aloud at dinner, while Ethan's law school applications sat unmentioned. I'd never confronted him. But tonight, I couldn't hold back. I stood, weaving through the crowd, and caught him near the dessert table, away from the chatter. "Ethan," I said, my voice low, steady. "We need to talk." He raised an eyebrow, sipping his drink. "About what?" "Sis, your heroic farm rescues." I stepped closer, my words sharp. "The email, the one that almost ended my career, that was you. Wasn't it?" His smile froze, just for a second before he laughed, too loud. "You're paranoid. Sarah, always have been." But his eyes darted away, betraying him. "Don't lie to me," I said, my voice a scalpel. "You were jealous. You wanted me gone." He set his glass down, hard, the clink cutting through the hum of the party. "You think you're so perfect," he hissed. "Dad's little star. You left us behind, chasing your noble cause. Don't act like a victim now." I held his gaze, unflinching. "I didn't leave you. You tried to bury me." He said nothing, just turned and walked away, his shoulders stiff. I stood there, the crowd's laughter fading to a dull roar in my ears. Back at my table, Patricia appeared, her perfume sharp, her smile falser than ever. "Sarah, don't cause a scene," she whispered, her hand grazing my arm. "This is our night." I pulled away. "Your night," I said, "not mine." Her lips parted, but no words came. She walked back to Robert, her heels clicking like a countdown. The room spun on, oblivious. But I felt the weight of every glance, every whisper. I wasn't invisible yet, but they were trying to make me so. The banquet hall hummed with clinking glasses and murmured toasts, the air heavy with the weight of my parents' 25th anniversary celebration. I sat at my corner table, the fire exit looming behind me like an escape I refused to take. The chandelier light danced across the polished tables, but it didn't reach me. My navy dress felt tighter now, not from fit, but from the tension coiling in my chest. Ethan's earlier denial still burned his smug dismissal of the email that nearly destroyed my career as a surgeon. I gripped my water glass, the cold anchoring me as Patricia and Robert took the stage, their smiles practiced, their hands linked like a perfect postcard. The crowd clapped, warm and oblivious, while I sat, a shadow in their story. Then Ethan stood, grabbing the microphone with the ease of a man used to commanding rooms. His suit was sharp, his grin sharper. "To Mom and Dad," he began, his voice booming, "and to family, the ones who show up, even if they're just small-town docs playing hero in nowhere towns like Bend." The room erupted in laughter, harsh and bright, like a spotlight pinning me down, heads turned, eyes landing on me, some curious, some mocking. Patricia's smile tightened, but she didn't correct him. Robert looked at his shoes. I didn't move, didn't blink. My silence wasn't surrender, it was steel. But inside, my heart thumped, a rhythm I knew from the OR, steady under pressure. The laughter faded, and Ethan raised his glass again, ready to move on, to erase me once more. But then a chair scraped across the floor, loud enough to cut through the chatter. Dr. Michael Carter stood, his face calm but resolute, his white coat swapped for a tailored blazer. I hadn't seen him enter, hadn't known he was here. Michael, the colleague I'd saved 3 years ago in a desperate surgery, his heart failing on my table after a botched procedure elsewhere. He walked to the stage, not rushed, not hesitant, just certain. The room stilled, forks hovering, glasses pausing mid-air. Ethan's smirk faltered as Michael took the microphone from his hand. "Excuse me," Michael said, his voice clear, carrying like a pulse through the hall. "I need to say something about Dr. Sarah Mitchell." My name hit the air like a spark. Heads turned again, but this time, the eyes weren't mocking, they were waiting. 3 years ago, he continued, I was dying, a failed bypass, a ticking clock. Sarah operated for 9 hours in a rural hospital with outdated equipment. She didn't just save my life, she saved my faith in what medicine can be. His eyes found mine, steady, unflinching. She's not a small-town doc. She's a surgeon who's saved hundreds, who's just been nominated for the National Medical Association's Humanitarian Award. The room gasped, a collective intake of breath that sucked the air dry. Patricia's hand froze on her wine glass, her knuckles white. Robert's head snapped up, his eyes wide, like he was seeing me for the first time. Ethan swayed, his bourbon splashing onto the floor, the glass slipping from his fingers. It hit the hardwood with a dull thud, the sound echoing in the silence. Michael didn't stop. Sarah works in Bend because she chooses people over prestige, he said. She's not just a doctor. She's a hero to every patient who's walked out of her OR alive." He turned to me, his voice softer now, but still carrying, "Thank you, Sarah. You deserve this room's respect." The applause started slow. A single clap from a stranger at a nearby table. Then another, until it swelled, filling the hall like a heartbeat. I stood, not because I wanted to, but because my body moved on instinct, like it did in surgery, calm, precise. Ethan's face was pale, his mouth open, no words coming. Patricia's smile was gone, replaced by something brittle, like glass about to crack. I didn't smile, didn't nod. I just stood there, letting their eyes settle on me, letting them see the woman they'd tried to erase. For the first time, they didn't know where to place me. And that was power. The applause faded, leaving a hum in the banquet hall, like the aftershock of a truth too long buried. The chandeliers cast their glow, but the light felt sharper now, exposing every crack in the facade of my parents' 25th anniversary celebration. I stood by my corner table, the fire exit still looming behind me, my navy dress catching the eyes that had ignored me moments before. Dr. Michael Carter's words hung in the air. Dr. Sarah Mitchell. A hero, a surgeon, nominated for a national award. The room was no longer theirs. It was mine. If only for this moment. Patricia approached first, her heels clicking softly on the hardwood, her face a mask of practiced calm. Her pearls gleamed, but her eyes betrayed her flickering, uncertain. "Sarah," she said, her voice low, almost a whisper. "Can we talk?" She gestured to a quiet corner near the dessert table, where the scent of chocolate and regret mingled. I followed, not because I owed her, but because I wanted to hear what she'd say now, after years of silence. She smoothed her dress, a nervous tick, and forced a smile. We didn't know," she began. "All this about your work, the award. You never told us." I held her gaze, my voice steady. "Cold. You never asked. Mom, you called me a failure for choosing Bend." Her lips parted, but no sound came. She looked away, her fingers twisting the edge of her napkin. "I thought you were throwing your life away," she said finally, her voice cracking. "I wanted more for you." I stepped closer, my words sharp, deliberate. "You wanted more for you. You wanted a daughter who fit your story, not mine." Her eyes glistened, but I didn't soften. "You erased me, Mom. You let Ethan try to ruin me." She flinched, like my words were a slap, but said nothing. The silence between us was heavy, like the air before a storm. Ethan appeared then. His tie loosened, his bourbon replaced with a water glass he gripped too tightly. His smirk was gone, replaced by a tight-jawed unease. "Sarah, look," he started, his voice louder than it needed to be. "That thing with Michael, it was dramatic. Let's not make this a spectacle." I turned to him, my eyes narrowing. "You made it a spectacle, Ethan, when you called me a small-town doc in front of everyone." His jaw twitched, but he pressed on. "I was joking. You're too sensitive. Always have been." I laughed. A short, bitter sound. A joke. Like that email you sent to the medical board 2 years ago. His face paled, his fingers tightening around the glass. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, but his voice shook, betraying him. "Don't lie to me," I said, stepping closer, my voice low, cutting. "You tried to bury my career because you couldn't stand Dad being proud of me. You wanted me gone." He opened his mouth, then closed it, his eyes darting to the crowd now watching us. "You're wrong," he muttered, But it was weak, hollow. I didn't need his confession. His guilt was written in the sweat on his brow. A woman in a red dress approached, her smile tentative. "Dr. Mitchell, I read about your work in the Oregonian. You saved my cousin last year." She extended her hand, and I shook it, her grip warm, real. Another guest, an older man in a suit, joined us, heard about that award nomination. He said, his voice gruff but kind, "You're doing God's work out there." I nodded, the weight of their words settling like a shield. The room was shifting, whispers spreading, phones glowing as guests typed furiously. Michael's speech had been recorded. I realized a grainy video already flickering across social media. The hashtag, Dr. Mitchell, rising like a pulse. I looked back at Patricia, still clutching her napkin, and Ethan, now staring at the floor. They didn't move, didn't speak. The crowd's eyes were on me now, not them. I wasn't their failure anymore. I was their reckoning. The road back to Bend was quieter than the drive to Portland, the Cascades now cloaked in early morning mist, their peaks softened like a memory trying to fade. I drove with the windows cracked, the cool air sharp with pine, my hands steady on the wheel of my Subaru. Michael's words from the anniversary party echoed in my head. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a hero, a surgeon, nominated for a national award. They carried weight, not just for me, but for every doctor like me, working in the shadows of small towns, dismissed by those who measure success in skyscrapers. Ethan's betrayal, Patricia's silence, the laughter that had cut me open, they didn't break me. They lit a fire. I wasn't going back to the hospital to just save lives. I was going to change them. Deschutes Memorial was waiting when I pulled into the parking lot. Its brick facade worn but steady, like the people it served, inside. The familiar hum of monitors and the sharp scent of antiseptic greeted me. I slipped into my scrubs, the fabric cool against my skin, and checked the day's surgery schedule. But my mind wasn't on the OR. It was on something bigger. That anonymous email Ethan sent to the medical board 2 years ago, accusing me of misconduct, had nearly ended my career. I'd survived, but how many others hadn't? How many doctors, nurses, medics had been silenced by jealousy, by families who couldn't see their worth? I sat at my desk, a stack of patient charts to my left, and opened my laptop. I typed the words Heartstrong Foundation, a support network for healthcare workers in rural hospitals' legal aid, mental health resources, a shield against those who'd tear them down. I spent weeks building it, late nights after surgeries, coffee gone cold, emails to colleagues across Oregon. I called in favors, reached out to a lawyer friend in Salem, drafted a mission statement. We don't erase the healers, we empower them. The idea was simple but fierce. Protect those who serve where others won't. Give them a voice when their own families, or boards, or bosses try to silence them. I thought of the nurse in my hospital, Carla, who'd once told me her sister called her work glorified babysitting. I thought of the med student I'd mentored, whose father said he'd wasted his degree on a reservation clinic. They deserved more than dismissal. They deserved a fight. I announced Heartstrong at a medical conference in Seattle, the convention center a maze of glass and steel, a far cry from Bend's quiet streets. The room was packed doctors, administrators, a few reporters, their phones poised to capture sound bites. I stepped to the podium, my voice steady, my hands still, like they were in surgery. I was told I was a failure for choosing a rural hospital. I began, the words carrying across the silent crowd. My family tried to erase me, even sent an email to ruin my career. But I didn't break. I built Heartstrong is for every healer who's been told they're not enough. We're here to fight for you." The room erupted, applause rolling like a wave. A reporter in the front row scribbled furiously. Another raised her phone, live streaming. A letter arrived later that week, forwarded from the hospital, a patient I'd saved years ago. Now a mother, thanking me for giving her a future. It was proof Heartstrong wasn't just an idea. It was a lifeline. The conference stage faded, but the fire didn't. I was done being invisible. I'd written my story in blood and sutures, and now I was writing it for others. The crowd's applause still echoed in my chest, a rhythm stronger than any heartbeat I'd ever saved. The Deschutes River shimmered under the late afternoon sun, its surface catching light like a promise kept. My new home sat on its banks. A small cedar cabin tucked among pines, far enough from Bend to feel like a world apart. I stood on the porch, the wood creaking softly under my boots, a mug of coffee cooling in my hands. The air smelled of earth and water, clean and unhurried. I'd left the hospital early today. No surgeries scheduled, just a quiet afternoon to breathe. My scrubs were folded away, replaced by jeans and a flannel shirt, my hair loose for once, catching the breeze. This was freedom, not loud, not flashy, but steady, like a heartbeat I'd learned to trust. Inside, an easel stood by the window, a half-finished painting of the river glowing in shades of blue and gold. I'd started it last weekend, my hands trading scalpels for brushes, carving out moments for myself after years of giving them away. A leather journal lay open on the kitchen table, its pages filled with thoughts I hadn't had time to name before reflections on patients saved, on nights spent fighting for lives, on the family that tried to erase me. The last line I'd written stared back. I don't need their approval to be whole. I closed the journal, its weight light in my hands, and locked it in a drawer. Some stories don't need to be shared. They just need to be true. My phone buzzed, the old hospital-issued one I still kept out of habit. A message from Dr. Michael Carter, his voice warm through the static. "Sarah, Heartstrong just got a national grant. You did this. You're changing lives." I smiled, small but real, and deleted the message. Not because it didn't matter, but because it did. The foundation was growing legal aid for a nurse in Idaho, counseling for a doctor in Montana, a scholarship for a med student choosing rural care. It wasn't just my legacy, it was theirs, too. I'd turned down an offer from a Chicago hospital last week, a 6-figure salary and a corner office. They'd called it a dream job. But dreams don't always wear suits or live in cities. Mine was here, in the quiet of Bend, in the lives I saved, in the foundation I'd built from the ashes of my family's betrayal. Ethan's email to the medical board. Patricia's cold silence. Robert's averted eyes they'd tried to dim me, but I burned brighter. I stepped back onto the porch, the river stretching wide before me, its current steady, endless. A knock came at the door, soft but sure. It was Lily, a girl from town, no older than 12, her bike leaning against a tree. She held a small basket bread, apples, a folded newspaper I hadn't asked for. "Dr. Mitchell," she said, her eyes bright. "My mom says you're famous now. That video from Seattle's all over the internet." I took the basket, my smile soft. Not famous. Lily, just doing what's right. She grinned and ran off, her laughter trailing like sunlight. I unfolded the paper, a headline about Heartstrong, a photo of me at the conference, my face calm but fierce. I set it down, unbothered. Fame wasn't the point. Being seen was. I walked to the river's edge, the water lapping at the bank. Its sound a quiet hymn. My phone stayed silent. No calls from Patricia, no texts from Ethan. I didn't expect them. I didn't need them. I'd built a life that didn't ask for their permission, a legacy that didn't carry their name. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in fire and shadow. I stood there, whole, unbroken, and finally free. The river's whisper faded as I stepped back into the cabin, the Deschutes' steady rhythm still echoing in my chest. I sat at the kitchen table, the wood worn smooth by time, my journal closed but its truth alive. Dr. Sarah Mitchell wasn't just a name anymore. It was a story, carved in every life I'd saved, every scar I'd earned, every fight I'd won. The world was starting to see it, too. That grainy video from the Seattle conference, my voice steady as I spoke of Heartstrong, had spread across screens, carrying my words to strangers who nodded, shared, believed. But this wasn't about headlines or hashtags. It was about what came next, what I'd learned, what I wanted others to carry forward. First, your worth isn't defined by the voices that dismiss you. My family, Patricia, Robert. Ethan called me a failure for choosing a rural hospital over city lights. They laughed, mocked, even tried to sabotage me with that anonymous email to the medical board. But I found my value in the OR, in the pulse of a patient's heart under my hands, in the gratitude of a logger named Tom, or a mother named Lily. You don't need approval to shine. Your work, your choices, your fight, they define you. Look at your life, at what you've built despite the doubts. That's your truth. Second, forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. I faced Ethan at that anniversary party, called out his betrayal, and walked away without his apology. I didn't forgive to erase the pain, I did it to free myself. Holding on to anger is like gripping a scalpel too long. It cuts you deeper than anyone else. Let go. But don't let them rewrite your story. Stand up. Speak out. Even if your voice shakes, the moment you claim your space, like I did when Michael spoke my name, you take back the power they tried to steal. Third, your legacy is what you build, not what you inherit. I could have stayed Patricia's daughter, Ethan's sister, the one who didn't fit. Instead, I built Heartstrong, a foundation for healers like me, for those told they're not enough because they serve where others won't. You don't need a famous name or a perfect family to leave a mark. Start where you are, a kind word, a bold choice, a hand reaching out to someone else. That's how you outlast the silence. I've seen what happens when we stay quiet, when we let others dim our light. I've also seen what happens when we refuse. Heartstrong is proof hundreds of doctors, nurses, medics now have a voice because I spoke. You can, too. Share this story if you've ever felt unseen, unheard, pushed aside. Comment Heartstrong if you believe in those who serve the forgotten. Like, share, subscribe. Let's make sure no one else has to fight alone. I believe in you, because I know what it's like to stand up from the ashes. You're not just enough. You're everything.